Okay, looks like it's on. Okay, we're good. Welcome everyone to our live session for our Fearless Artist community. As you know, we do these live video sessions about 3 times a month. We alternate learning and painting together, and critique sessions where we talk about look for growth and ways we can improve as artists. And we're always looking to do that, really. And really, we just get to share in this process of being on this creative journey together. And so today we're going to be continuing our series that I'm titling Learn to See Like an Artist. We're going to be talking about simplifying today. And our alternate title would be How Much Can I Get Away With? So we're going to talk about that today. It's a good day. Kids are wrapping up school here where we are in British Columbia. They've been doing school online for the last couple of months, and that's been a new experience. And actually, right now, my son is, they get to be 1 day a week at school, and my son's at his awards ceremony today. And so I just saw he received a excellence award in one of the subjects he was taking in grade 8. So that's good because I didn't really have very high hopes for his academics this year. He's kind of more interested in being creative than being dedicated, and that's all right. Anyhow, just rambling a little bit. As you know, as I think about the last couple of months, Robin and I have been talking about this because, we're always talking about learning to sustain a thriving creative practice. And right now we're in a place where that's just a little bit tough. What I've learned is over the last few months, and I kind of had high hopes when we went into kind of lockdown here, when everything shut down and we were committed to staying home for weeks at a time. And there's that idea that while I'm home, I'm going to have all this time to paint. And for some of us that happened, and yet our hearts weren't really in it. And for some of us, we didn't have the time we thought because, yes, I'm home, but there's all of these other things calling for my attention. And so we found that, at least for me, now, especially now that we're several months into this whole kind of new normal, my mindset right now is when I'm really starting to feel that fatigue. Actually, it made me think a lot about when my second daughter was born and I had a toddler. And, that first week or so when Samantha was brand new, it's this little baby honeymoon and everything feels manageable. And then about 3 weeks in, when the sleep deprivation starts to hit, that's when things get really tough. And we had family come to visit to meet the new baby. And I don't even remember that visit. I was just that tired and I wasn't myself. And I'm feeling a little bit like that now. We're a couple of months in. We've been working really hard at handling everything properly, and things just keep happening. And so I don't know if you're feeling the same way as I am, but lately I've just felt very strongly how important it is to give yourself a little bit of permission to not always be okay all the time, to not always be thriving, to not always be on that path of growth. It is okay to pause and take that breather and to just let yourself exist in your space for a little while. And so this weekend we had made plans to go hiking, and then the weather forecast looked a little iffy, and it was a really good excuse to say, we're just going to stay home. And we had that extra day at home, and to clear the calendar just a little bit more, and then with that cleared calendar, not feel obligated then to fill that time with something productive. We are so pressured to be productive all the time. And if you're doing that to yourself creatively, at some point you're going to need that breather. And so it's okay. I'm in that place where, I'm going to get really honest with you. This is where your core values come in. This is where, all that talk that we have about doing it for the process, paint because you love to paint to make the act of painting enjoyable, and don't worry about the product. This is where we start to find out if we really believe that's true, or if we're just kind of mouthing those words and still hoping for a successful painting at the end. Because when I paint for the joy of it, I have to be okay with the fact that I'm not always going to be productive, that I'm not always going to see results. And so I guess that's just what I've been thinking about a lot lately. Do I see that I really believe in painting for the process? Or am I still secretly hoping for that masterpiece? And then I have to remind myself again that it's okay to just exist in this space and just paint with letting it go. Anyhow, I feel like that was a little bit of a ramble, but I wanted to let you know what's been on my mind and on my heart. Maybe I'll be able to write it down more articulately for a little article later. Yeah, Kathleen says our culture is about produce, produce, produce. So we are going against the grain when we pause. So true. We are wired to be productive. That's why, isn't it funny that the first thing you hear when you think about somebody being an artist is you think of the phrase starving artist. Like immediately they connect this act of being an artist with, is it productive? Is it financially viable? There's a lot of careers that don't make you a lot of money, and they don't tack that word starving onto those titles. So what's with that, right? But we get that. We get tarred with that brush of needing to produce and needing to justify what we're doing. And I really appreciate my husband actually, because he loves building hot rods. And when he builds a car, he doesn't think about whether or not the amount of time and money he's spending is really going to make this car like financially viable for something he could sell down the road. He recognizes that the value for him is actually in the time that he spends and how much he enjoys it. And that has really helped me. He has always reiterated to me that I do not have to make money at painting in order to, feel good about being an artist. And that's a pretty good thing to realize. Okay, so let's get down to the nitty gritty. Let's work on our lesson. And oh, thank you, Susan. Susan says the ramble is where we all connect to each other with our feelings about our art. Yeah, I want you to know what's going on in my head, because maybe it makes a little bit of sense. Maybe you're thinking some of the same thoughts. Maybe it makes a little bit of sense when you see where I'm going with my art as well. We, as artists, we tell the world who we are through our art. We just do. Our identity comes out in our painting. It's how we communicate. And so, yeah, we get to share it in our words, but also in our paintings. Okay, so learning to see like an artist. We have talked about redefining drawing, that drawing does not necessarily mean pulling out a pencil and doing pencil sketches, that we can learn to draw, to render our scene in order to know what's important about it and learning how to simplify. We want to learn how to also detach from the subject by asking ourselves some questions. Here were some questions that I listed that we could ask ourselves as we learn to simplify to get to the heart of our subject. One question is, what if I painted this as an abstract? What if this object that I'm painting was only a single shape? We see that with symbolism. When we symbolize a heart, we draw a heart. If you're playing a game of Pictionary, is a great example. Sorry, my phone is ringing. If you're playing a game of Pictionary and you need to draw an elephant, you might draw, the contour of the elephant's body with that very distinctive trunk, simplifying it down. You don't even need to draw the eye or the ear in order to get that kind of shape as instantly recognizable. And so often I think about simplifying my scene as kind of going, almost defaulting to the Pictionary and then building on it. I also will sometimes ask myself, what if the scene that I'm looking at could only be drawn using standard shapes, triangles, rectangles, circles? What would that look like? I use a notan or a value study to simplify my scene and learn to see it more abstractly. I painted really fast as I can. I do a 2-minute study. I do a 30-second study. I do a 10-minute study, simplifying in those different time frames with the time that I have. You can do a contour drawing where you draw just the outline shapes without lifting your pencil perhaps to see how everything fits together. You can also learn how to detach from your subject by studying other artists' work. When you see another artist's painting where they've simplified the scene, copy it. See where they've made their decisions and how they've simplified. It can really help you to kind of cut through all the clutter and get right to the heart of the scene. We learn to see as we try new things and work to simplify our subject. I'm a better drawer, even though I rarely draw, because painting has taught me how to see. In our last lesson, we also talked about painting water. And as we worked to paint water, it involved learning to see the many different colors that we have in water, because water is both reflective and transparent. And so that's a very challenging subject that is going to be different depending on where it is and what's happening with that water, whether it's moving or still, and so forth. Today we're talking about simplifying to better express ourselves. And something I want you to think about is maybe just look up into your room for a moment, wherever you happen to be, and look straight ahead. Now, the deal is, as you look straight ahead, you can only really look at one thing at a time. Now, you're probably at home in a room that's very familiar to you, so you know the objects that are seen out of the corner of your eye. So right now I'm looking straight ahead beyond my computer. There's a painting on the wall. I can see just an edge of a cabinet where I store my painting supplies. But I need to, if I want to see more of the scene, I need to start moving my eyes around. Maybe I want to ask myself a question. Is that orange suitcase that I keep my reference photos in on the second or third shelf of the bookcase over there? I can guess at it. I can approximate the height that it is on the shelf without looking, because I'm very familiar with the scene. But if I wanted to be precise, what shelf is it on? Is it right side up or upside down? Is the clasp open or closed? I have to turn my head and look. My vision is very restricted to a narrow field of view. And when we pull out our reference photo, we often forget just how narrow our viewpoint is. We have the luxury of looking all over our reference photo, square inch by square inch, and we forget that, when you're standing in that place, looking at whatever it is that has awestruck you or captivated you enough to want to take a photo and paint that scene, that you're not seeing everything your camera captures. You're just seeing that one thing. And so as we paint, we want to learn how to get to that one thing, that thing that was in our narrow field of view. So that's kind of, I like to remind myself of that. That's one reason I like to paint things that I've photographed myself, places that I've been, because I can use my memory then to help me. And so when I pull out a reference photo, and I have a few here, I can think to myself, why did I take this photo? What struck me? Where did my eyes go? Where were my eyes? And what do I remember about that scene? So I bring those two things together. Let's switch the camera over and we'll do a little bit more talking about this. Oh, just trying to figure out the order of things. We're gonna have to just switch the camera back and forth a few times, I think. Come on. Oh, there it is. Bless me. Okay, we're just before you on my work surface here. You can see the reference photo we worked with last week. And so we're going to take a look at, first of all, the painting that I did from that reference photo, which wasn't complete. And as I mentioned, I was not 100% satisfied with it. The first version of a reference photo always shows me what I don't know. The areas that are strong are fine, but then I have weak areas that are glaring to me. They stand out. I'm just going to mute the mic for a moment so I can blow my nose. There we go. Okay, so this first version, actually, I really was quite fond of the colors. I like the strong shape of this far hill. I like the curve of the landscape coming down. That gave that feeling of the river rushing down below me. But I did not like the most important part of the scene that I felt was the strong contrast of those reflections on the water. And I didn't like how this felt very aimless to me. It didn't feel good. And after I turned the camera off, I thought to myself, if I made those reflections important, the most important part of the painting, maybe what I could do is abstract them and see them as birds, was what I actually thought, because I see this kind of V shape that's almost created there that made me think of a bird in flight. And so I thought, what if I painted those as birds? So I gave it a try and did this version. And I'm really liking how this came out, actually. I didn't get perfect birds, but you can see how much bolder I was. I chose a bolder choice of color. And I left my whites as a pattern. You can see a V shape here, little hints of the same kind of curving shapes. And that felt really good to me. It was exciting to see that come together. I also really liked the strong shape that I created here with the cliff. That felt really right as well. And so because I had this under my belt, feeling like I would change a few things about it, it immediately gave me the freedom to go into this one and apply some of those what ifs to this painting. And I think we could do that once, and we're going to do that again today. But before we go there, I want to talk about some different ways that will help you if you want to do this same thing where you take your reference photo and you want to start to see it as an abstract. Instead of painting water here, I was working to think about those bird shapes. I wasn't thinking about water anymore. And I think if I abstracted even more, if I released myself from feeling like, okay, this is water, this is water, this is water, I have to get it to look like water. I thought, okay, I've got, those beautiful pattern of the bird shape, the colors that are surrounding it are that murky kind of brown color. And then we see that blue, and you can see I really had fun putting that blue in there and having the color transitions. So giving myself the freedom to think of it as abstract shapes really helped me in this version of the scene. And I think it will continue as I continue to develop this scene. So we're going to go there today. But before we do, let's just switch the camera over one more time. This time I want to show you some reference photos. So let's just pop that up. Okay, so this is our original reference photo. And what I like to do often with reference photos is tweak them a little bit in my computer. So I might take that reference photo and convert it to black and white. That's a pretty common thing that most of us know how to do. Using the different options that we have. I often use Google Photos, which has some basic color editing options. But maybe you want to take it a step further. And we're just going to backtrack here for a second and scroll down. You'll be seeing that wheelbarrow next time we do a lesson on this subject. Okay, yeah, this is the one I want to look at. Open up. And it does what I say. Okay, so this reference photo is one of my favorites from this spring. Isn't it just the loveliest little place? And I got to paint that very interestingly, and you may have seen this on my Instagram account. I got to paint my own version right here, and you can see it's very different than the original reference photo. But you can also see how they're related. And it was really interesting that when I posted this version on my Instagram, I had a number of viewers comment that they actually liked it better and that the original photo felt a little flat. And that was pretty cool because the original photo it's a beautiful spot. I walk past this location, this little pond, almost every day, and I always love just looking in there at that little bird sanctuary. It's a special place to me, and so to paint it this different, sometimes we feel like we're robbing our reference photo a little bit because we're not being true to what it looks like, and sometimes we feel like it has to be really close to the reference photo for it to show people how we feel about it. And so I thought it was really special to me that this painting did give that feeling of the light that I see, the purple shadows, and that backlit kind of glow of trees. It all kind of came together for me, and it made me very, very happy. But we do have that literal mind that says we have to paint it just like we see, and that's where working with some of these photo editing apps can be really helpful. So one app that I used was just that Google Photos editor, and it's not going to switch for me. Hang on a second. Let's see if there we go. I think you can see it now. Nope, still not. Okay, bear with me while I fix it. For some reason, this thing that worked once does not work very well anymore, because it used to always let me scroll between pictures, and now it's a little bit sporadic. There we go. I think I've got it fixed. Okay, so this one, you can see I upped the contrast big time. So instead of seeing the more subtle shadows, we are seeing very strong difference between light and dark. And this alone is a really good place to start if you're wanting to simplify your scene, because we've lost all the details in the dark shadows, and even our lightest values are kind of blurring together here. You're starting to see that large mass of pale green as one shape. It's not near trees and far trees and trees in the middle ground. It's really just this flow of green gold across the kind of the middle of the page. The same with the water, kind of shows up as one object, and then those dark shadows really tie the entire painting together. Let's see if we have another one we can look at. Okay, here's a black and white version, and again, it's really easy to create a black and white version, and always helpful to look at those values. But I think at a certain point, it's really helpful to take a look at a version where we can kind of lose some detail, so we can study the way everything fits together. Instead of looking at individual objects, we're really seeing just a handful. We see sky, we see the green gold, we see the water, and we see the dark shadows, and a few little sparkles of color in the foreground. So that's really simplified the scene. One more thing you can do, and this involves, for me, doing a little bit of searching around to find an app that would do it for me, but this is an app on my phone called PixArt, and it did this kind of mosaic thing which blurred my subject. And actually, I think actually blurring, using a photo editing app that would actually just blur the scene and so that all the details were indistinct is a really good way to do this. It doesn't have to be this kind of mosaic-y effect, but changing your reference photos so that you lose all of those little details, again, it helps you to simplify. And the goal here is, how much can I get away with? When I want to be free to express myself, I need to be willing to let go of a lot of detail. And just really find my own way of showing what I see. And when I simplify, I get a little more freedom to do that. And the great thing about simplifying is you can build on this. When you have a reference photo that you've blurred out like this, you can then create those large masses of shapes. And then if you want to, you can get in there and you can add detail, and you can end up with something that's quite close to the original reference photo if you want to. It is all up to you on how much detail you want to add. And so there's a lot of freedom there in building up those levels of detail. And I want you to be aware how much stronger your paintings can become when you start with that simplification, that foundational basic shapes, and build on that. So that's what we're going to be thinking about today as we look at this original reference photo, our river, and we're going to do a little bit of painting with it. And Catherine says, all I have to do is take my bifocals off. Yes, actually, I really agree with that. In fact, those early versions, you can almost think of them that way. Take your glasses off, and what do you see? Everything's a blur. And that is your foundation. And then you get a little bit better prescription with every level of detail that you add. So that's what we're doing. And Robin just shared a link to that PixArt app. I cannot promise that that is the best app out there. There are many other really good ones to use. So if you want to refer, if you're using one already and you want to refer it to the rest of the group, go ahead and do that. I would appreciate it. Okay, so we've got our value version of the photo. We've got our photograph, and we've got our first version, and then we've got that knee-jerk reaction where I painted from here again. You know, when I took this photo, I'm standing on this hill. I was looking over here because I had a group of kayakers I was supposed to pick up that day. And this was actually so bright that I couldn't look directly at it. The sun was just gleaming off of that part of the landscape. And so it's very possible that the detail that I'm trying to get in here is unnecessary. And maybe I want to simplify the scene so our eye goes right to this area of the painting. And so, you know, this idea, that obsession with getting these ripples right, is also a part of learning to let go. Is what can I get away with means, you know, do I crop out this detail? And when I've given myself permission to paint something in multiple versions, I get to find out. I get to do a version where I'm obsessed with these ripples, and I get to do a version where I leave them simplified. And so I don't know what your vote is, if I should add those ripples in today, or if we should simplify and just focus on getting the viewer to look off for those kayakers way off in the distance. Waiting for them to come around the corner. We actually got to go kayaking on Saturday, and it was a lot of fun. I took the kids, and we saw a couple deer feeding on the edge of the river, and just flocks of birds flying out of these sandy cliff banks. They had little nests in there, and Canada goose with a bunch of little babies, goslings. It was pretty cool. A lot of fun. Okay, we're seeing some good links to different apps you can use on your different devices. There's phone apps, there's Photoshop, there's lots of options. Okay, so let's do some painting. And once again today, I think I'm going to work top to bottom. It's a really good way to paint landscapes. And I'm going to start by just propping up my board just a little bit here. It's always nice to have that bit of an angle when you're working top to bottom and wanting to flow downward. And I'm going to work with one of my favorite blues, Cinereous Blue from Sennelier, for my sky. It really does have that bright, sunny summer day sky. And this is my Da Vinci flat modeler brush. It's Da Vinci Forte Synthetics 20 millimeter. I had a hard time finding this brush until I realized that most websites call it a mottler brush, and that made it a lot easier. Most of the products that I refer, I do have links on my website for you to order if you find that you must have them. I really like this brush because I never used to work with a flat brush, and so using the flat brush forces me to explore new shapes, and it felt really foreign the first few times that I used this brush. It felt really kind of wrong. I have a paper towel here. I'm just going to use that for any drips that come off my brush, mostly because once I get that first wash of water across here, you want to always be aware of how much water you're bringing to the painting. If it's already quite fluid, it's really nice to take that drip of water off so that you're not swamping the paper. Now, a color that I really liked using in the last version that I showed you was some of my hematites. I think it was the hematite burnt scarlet, so we'll work with that today. I also used a bit of burnt sienna and quinacridone sienna, which is a marvelous orange. And let's mix up some green here, first of all, and get that background hill. And I'm really liking a combination of sap green and quinacridone sienna. It makes this beautiful chocolatey brown that you can see over here. And it makes some really nice earthy greens. So let's use, yeah, I think that will work. Let's just throw that in there, and it comes right across like so. And then this this can feel like this can be all one shape. I know in our heads we go, okay, we've got background trees and foreground trees or midground trees, but you know, it really comes together as one shape. And so let's just do that. And then we get it out of the way. And then again, learning to see like an artist means not thinking about the names of things. Let's not put labels on all the things that we're painting. Rather, we think about the shapes that we're painting and observing them. And let's get some of that brown in. The hematite burnt scarlet is a really wonderful textural color. And so just by using that, I should be able to get my cliff right where I want it. I'm going to use a little bit of that brown that was in there. It's got the same greens. And you can see a little bit of the green creeping up into my sky here. So that's another reason why you do want to kind of angle your board so that any color that wants to flow and whoosh across the page has a little more looseness, has gravity on its side. So the hematite just gives a little bit of texture so we don't have to paint the roughness of the landscape, and that's something that I really like. And I'm going to pull that same kind of nice brown up to my beach here. There's a little sandbar, I guess not really a beach, but a little bit of the landscape here. And then some land coming down here. And there's reflections all over from the sunshine. And you know, we get blind spots when we're painting, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but when you're painting, sometimes it's like you're deep into this painting, you're adding finishing touches, or you've put in a whole bunch of detail, and then all of a sudden you realize that you completely missed like a major element of the painting. Has that ever happened to you? Tell me in the comments. Help me not to feel so alone. It just happens. And then you have to decide how important that thing is. You know, do you add it in? Do you work around it? Sometimes it's, you know, you're painting a house and you failed to put the windows in. Something like that. And then you got to struggle. Sometimes the only thing that fixes it is just starting over. I'm going to add some water here and let it flow. But I had a little pool of water up here on the edge of the paper, and now it wants to bleed down into my sky. So we're going to have a little mess there. And I also have a line forming because I stopped my sky too soon. I'm going to add a little bit of water. I might just adjust my hills and trees to compensate for that a little later, but right now I'm just going to soften a bit. A hard edge is one of the hardest things to camouflage, and so I would rather soften, sometimes even if it means creating blooms, to tell you the truth. Okay, so we have kind of a soft obscurity of tree back here. I also want to just soften this a little bit by adding some water. Adding more water to my hematite mixture means I'm going to get to see the hematite texture show up a little bit more. It's such a beautiful texture, and I want to see more of that. And I'm pausing before I touch my water because I have a lot of fluidity right up here. And if I touch it with my brush, it's going to run down the page. And so let's just see what we can do there. Where's my colors? Hematite. We're going to just add a little bit of detail in here with the hematite. I'm also going to use this thirsty brush to lift some of that excess color so it doesn't flow rampantly into my water. And then I think, let's see if we can't use a little bit of dry brush here too. Probably the wrong brush for this. It's really interesting because observing my water last week, or last time, we noticed that the water is not blue down here. It's kind of a murky grayish, greenish brown. Up here, it's reflecting more sky, and so it does actually transition to a blue. And one thing I do, I'm not sure if I mentioned this in a past video. I don't think I have yet, actually. If you want to identify a color, like up here and down here, if you want to identify what those colors are so you can match them better, a really good way to do that is to isolate that color. You can do it on your computer by zooming in to just a tiny section of your painting. I mean, get it so close you can see all of those little individual pixels. Or one easy way to do it, and I don't think I have it here, is I'll take an index card, usually a white one, and punch a little hole in it. And I'll just place that index card right over my painting, and it will pop that one area. It will be surrounded by white, the white of the card, and you can actually see much more accurately what color you're looking at. And isolating that color can really help you to understand what you're actually seeing. So yeah, be aware of that. Okay. So let's grab some blue. And I don't think I want to use pure cinereous blue. So let's clean a space. Actually, okay, sorry, my that has never happened, but my broadcasting software decided to disconnect for a second. So hopefully you can still see me and hear me again. I think it was just for a few seconds, and I didn't keep painting. I just stopped in panic. Okay, so here's my cinereous blue. I've added a little bit of cobalt blue. Let's use some of the hematite burnt scarlet to kind of make it a bit grayer. And it's gotten immediately a little murky. Whoops, I'll zoom out so you can see that a little bit better. And actually that might work for my water. Let's try it. So that's going to start right in here. And everything's going to bleed together. Again, this is also not just painting the river scene again, but what can I get away with? You know, and that's and one way to answer that question is how simply can I paint this scene? What can I get away with? And the good news is, no matter how daring you are with that question, what can I get away with? You will never have anyone showing up at your door to arrest you for crimes against art. Okay, right away I'm starting to think about those birds and how much I want to leave. And then I also need to think about the color transition. I'm really kind of liking that. Maybe this should, I don't know, what do you think? Should I put those ripples in or not? I'm gonna go check the comments, see if you gave me some advice here. Okay, I see a lot of people saying simplify. Let's do it. Let's take, and this is actually so good. Very, very often when I am painting and I'm getting to this place where I want to paint my version of a scene, and I'm going with quite a lot of hematite in my blue right now, look at that. So often it involves taking that thing that I thought I had to add into my painting, for example, the very eye-catching, demanding ripples here that are lit by the sun, and saying, what if I didn't have to put that thing in at all? So often I get my most authentic version of the scene by breaking the rule, by questioning that thing that I thought I had to do. And that's a powerful realization because it can affect all of your paintings in the future, because it gives you that freedom to always to question everything, to challenge it all. And that can actually change your life because it gives you the freedom to question ideas, and you don't have to be a mindless sheep following what everybody else thinks you should do. And we need people like that in society, don't we? And artists should be those kinds of people. We get, what was that saying? Beware of artists, because they mix with all classes of society and are therefore the most dangerous. So, yeah, let's be dangerous. Let's be willing to say, well, what if we didn't have to do that? Yeah, everybody's doing it, but what if they didn't? Yeah, I'm supposed to paint it that way, but what if I didn't? And it's very, very freeing. Okay, I said I was going to use some Quin Sienna, and I have to because it's a gorgeous color. And yeah, and I just want to use it. So it's in here somewhere. And I had a question about my paints in my palette, didn't I? I'm just looking back. Oh, do I have my colors labeled in the palette? Yeah, I do. Right on the end of the tubs, I have marked the names of the colors, except for one, and and I can never remember which one it is. I always go for this one yellow, and then I realize it doesn't have a label, and I forgot what it was. So it happens. And it really, for me, because there's so many that are very similar in here, it really helps to pull out the color you're using and have it in your hand. Let's use some more Quin Sienna. And let's put in a nice dark contour here. That will give us that strong cliff shape. And then I really like blue, so let's pull out that cobalt blue, and that will add almost a black to that Quin Sienna mixture. So right now I've simplified a lot of things, and in simplifying I'm also going to strengthen. So I simplify by blurring together a lot of shapes. We've lost our, and I've made a big blue blob right there, so we'll have to fix that in a minute. So we've lost our ripples, you know, those white reflections, and we might try to tweak that in a minute. And I also, simplifying also can mean exaggerating your darks, exaggerating your shapes to make a stronger painting. So it's simpler because it's stronger. One thing I really like about this Forte brush is the comb-like marks that it can make, which are a lot of fun to use to create texture and simplification in your scene. I don't think I really need greens down here, actually. I'm going to undo that just with some water. So there will be still a hint of that green there, but not too much. And then I think I'm going to simplify this a little bit too. It's got a lot of strong dark pasty color. So let's just let that flow as well. Now up here, there were a few little twiggy sprouts of leaves, and I think I'd like to put them in today. I haven't in the past. You know, I'm losing my light here. It's gotten very overcast. We actually had flooding in town this weekend. I'm quite glad to live on the side of a hill, and we never have to worry about that where I live, but almost every year this week we get intense rains and flooding, and some years it's worse than others, so it's always interesting. So I was glad we did our kayaking before things got a little crazy on the river. let's put in a dark for some twig shapes. That's kind of fun. That green gold's pushing into my landscape here in an interesting way. Okay, I had this blue drip. Let's add a little bit of cobalt blue over into the palette here. You know, that mixture of cobalt blue and quince sienna and a little hematite gives us a really nice dark neutral. And I'm just going to see if I can't add a little bit of dark value to the water, just a little, and still let it flow a bit. Don't forget to squint at your reference photo from time to time. It's another good way to see without an app. Squinting, you know, it blurs everything, simplifies. And I'm tickling in some water. I'm going to let that flow and create texture. It's kind of a second level of detail here. The little hint of line, but still quite soft. Added a bit of shape and then bled it out. I'm going to stop here in just a moment. Thinking about what I can get away with also means generally keeping to a short time frame, because I know that the longer I paint, the more likely I am to chain myself to my reference photo. I don't want to go there. So I'm just going to add a little bit more detail back here, bring back some of that tree, distant tree shape, and a little bit of that beach sandbar stuff going on here. Maybe just like that. I also made a tiny blob of dot there that I didn't like. And it's okay, so this is a simplified version, and yeah, my light has really started to wash out a bit. Let's see if I can fix that just for a second. Not sure if that helps a bit. As the light changes and the day goes on, my studio needs become different as well. Okay. So really strong shape here. Look at how powerful that is. In fact, it's probably too powerful because I think it detracts from where we wanted the eye to kind of go more off into the distance. So I'm going to see if I can lift a little bit to soften. My paper towel creates a bit of texture too. You know, I think we often think when you're a new painter, we often think that painting means putting paint on paper, but often it can also mean lifting paint off and using your brush or a paper towel to lift away. And that lifting can actually bring us back to some very interesting textures that you don't get by simply applying paint. Even if you apply just the right color, sometimes you want to get some of that texture back. And then the other thing I can do to counter the strong shape of this is add another strong dark back here. In fact, what if we added the strong pop of blue? And a little strong pop of the quince sienna. Quince sienna just has this glow to it that I really like. There, that little pop is going to bring the eye, I think, back over into that part of the painting. And that placement of strong, simplified color. Okay. So I'm teaching myself how to see. That's really what this all comes down to. And yeah, just hang on. Well, your comments need to load. There we go. Okay, I'm just going to take a moment for your questions here. There we go. As we wrap up, my river, looking at it on the screen here, it looks kind of more gray than brown, which I'm not sure I love. But I'm this is the kind of thing where you need to take that break and come back and look at it after it's had a chance to dry. If you have questions, I'd love to see them. One thing I should comment on is I did use hematite for a lot of the brown in this painting. The deal with using hematite is it's a very, very granular color. It's going to create sedimentary texture, and that might take over your painting. It's interesting because when I use a sedimentary color, sometimes I look back and I think, oh, I probably shouldn't have used it over the entire painting for all my mixing of neutrals and so forth. But then other times I really like having that texture a little bit everywhere. So it's figuring out the kind of balance you like. And if you're wanting smoother washes, you might want to have like a burnt sienna or something to mix with your blue rather than the hematite. So that's an idea for you. Joe comments that she finds going quick produces better results, but others have told me to slow right down hours or multiple days. My personal approach, and you've seen me do this, is I paint in short bursts, 20 minutes, 30 minutes at the most, and then I give myself a break. I need to think slow and paint fast. So I take the time to process what I've been doing, to think about what I want to do next, to plan my painting in my head, and have a strong vision for what I want to do. When you start with that mental image, and then also start from a mindset of letting the paint do its thing, being adaptable, that gives you that freedom to paint a little more quickly and be reactive while you're painting, because you've done a lot of that mental work before you started painting. So I feel like for me that really works so well, and it makes my paintings stronger because my thinking time happens, a good bulk of it happens before I start painting and in between those painting sessions, and then I get to work on instinct during that painting session. I do need to wrap this up because I have a young man to pick up from school. I've been getting texts throughout the lesson telling me he won a bunch of awards. So I get to tell him how proud I am of him, which I am anyhow. But it's always, of course, as a parent, you're always just so, it's so great when other people see the young person that you are raising and recognize their leadership qualities and stuff like that. So I'm already excited, and he probably got, some kind of attendance award or something. Anyhow, so as you're painting over the next little while, I would encourage you to take a scene that you have been you've painted maybe once before, and for one thing, rethink what struck you about that painting. Why did you want to paint it in the first place? What do you look at first? What's the first thing you think of when you remember that scene? Maybe it's just the angle or a silhouette shape of, a roof line against the sky. It doesn't have to be, or an overall impression of light. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be a single item, but it just has to be that impression. What did you, what did you walk away with? And then how do we put that in our painting? It can take a few versions to find what works, but having this idea that you can kind of be a little bit of a rebel and think, what can I get away with in my paintings? How far could I go and have this still look like what I want it to look like? That's a lot of fun and very freeing. Okay, thanks for joining me today. I wish you well, and I will see you very soon in the Fearless Artist community. And bye for now.